Jazzcast Pros.
And welcome back to the High Vibe Table Talks. This is your host, Marshawn Hargrave, and today we're going to be talking about a specific dedicated time that I focus on a weekly-ish basis for my business. Dedicated creative time, dedicated rest time, dedicated CEO time, dedicated brainstorming time, and dedicated thinking time. So each of these times is me stepping out of worker bee mode and into queen bee mode. If you're a woman contemplating your next move, you've found the perfect podcast to empower your self-growth journey. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the cautiously ambitious woman, remove mental barriers and take action now so that you can achieve your high vibe desires. We're really grateful for our episode sponsor, L21 Solutions. That is a talent acquisition consulting company. L21 Solutions is owned by two Rochester women, Amanda and Crystal, and you can meet them at a free event on September 19th at the Pittsford Public Library. If you ever thought about creating a collaborative relationship with local universities to bring in fresh top-tier talent to your company, this event is a must-attend for you. Thank you again to L21 Solutions, and all the links to everything will be in the show notes, so definitely check those out. In this episode, I want to talk through the 5 time blocks that really lead me to a successful week, and they aren't things like answering emails or making cold calls or creating content, not like tactic-focused blocks. Those are important too, and I definitely do schedule those out, but that is not the type of time blocking that this episode will cover. We can get really lost in the tasks and the moving the needle forward items that need to get done. And so these 5 time blocks are working on your business versus other time blocking is working in your business. So we really have to be intentional about taking steps back to do the important but not urgent things for our business and for ourselves. If you've ever read Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he has a quadrant system. The 2 X's are level of importance and level of urgency. So quadrant 1 is important and urgent, so these are hair on fire things. Quadrant 2 is important, not urgent, aka back burner stuff. Quadrant 3 is things that are urgent but not important. These are things like answering phone calls, text messages, alerts on our phones. And quadrant 4 is not important and not urgent. Scrolling through TikTok, watching TV, there should be space in our week for each of these. And I can do a deep dive into each of the quadrants on a later episode because I think that, like I said, time for each is important. But each of these dedicated times falls into important but not urgent. When you do these types of activities that I'm going to talk about, the things that fall into the category of important and urgent hair on fire stuff starts to decrease because the dedicated time does big picture things which help be proactive about decreasing the things that are important and urgent. So I just threw a lot of words at you that you might be, Marshawn, you lost me a little bit, but stay with me and I'll talk about these 5 time blocks that I try to set time aside to do on a weekly basis, and I'm going to dive into each of them. With High Vibe Table Talks, we tackle the mental barriers and blocks that are preventing you from taking the next steps towards your high vibe. Subscribe to High Vibe Table Talks podcast on the Jazzcast Pros network. It's high time you activated your high vibes. So, these are my 5 time blocks. Dedicated creative time, dedicated rest time, dedicated CEO time, dedicated brainstorming time, and dedicated thinking time. So each of these times is me stepping out of worker bee mode and into queen bee mode. There is a lot of time spent being worker bee, and that is really important, especially when we're first starting our business. We're spending time doing all of the things, wearing all of the hats. Spending time in intentional queen bee mode will decrease burnout, create longevity in our business, and for ourselves. Sometimes you can get so lost in the minutia you can't see the forest for the trees, and it's imperative that you dedicate time to think deeply for yourself and for your business. The dedicated time doesn't look the same from week to week or month to month. Many times I think about what I'm craving at that moment. Again, I'm not perfect at doing all of this, but I have seen the weeks that I do these things overall be really rounded out and effective weeks. So let's dive into the first one. Dedicated creative time. If you've listened to any episodes of this podcast, you have heard about creativity and how much I think it's integral for us as human beings. As entrepreneurs, we are naturally creative people. I was someone who did not consider myself a creative for a long time, aka like 33 years. I truly now believe that we are all creative. And as entrepreneurs, we're ultimately creating something where there was nothing. Creativity and allowing space for that is so important when you're running a business because there's so many tasks that need to get done. And the creative time and task-oriented mind, they take up two different spaces. Allowing for that part of my brain to flourish and go crazy and have no restrictions is so important to me as a business owner and the health of the business. As I talked about with Robbie in episode 1 and 2, I love thinking about creativity as a relationship, and you have to allow space for your partner in the relationship to come forward. You use it as a muscle. It needs reps, it needs time, it needs practice, and it needs space. I will also say that I have an idea box. While I do allow space for creativity in my business and let that tap flow, sometimes new ideas show up as a distraction from the hard work and the grind that is currently going on. I've spoken about previously that sometimes new and shiny ideas are a form of fear showing up. When we're in the messy middle, a new idea that is shiny and feels good can be really tempting to go towards. While I don't want to lose these ideas because I think that they could lead to great things, I don't have the bandwidth or the headspace to hold on to them and compartmentalize, so I create a space for them to come top of mind and for a space for them to live until I do have the bandwidth to take action on them. So I have a little idea box. It's both a folder on my computer and I have like large Post-its in my office where I can put new ideas that pop in my brain when I have space to think through them properly, or even sometimes I just want to be in a creative space and I think through those more. So they have a place to live that's not my subconscious or the back of my brain. All that to say, dedicated creative time is the first time block that I use, and I think it's really important and a really great way to spend some time during the week. Let's get on to dedicated space 2, which is dedicated rest time. As entrepreneurs, we love our business. It is our baby. It's something we care deeply about. A trap that I have fallen into is the mindset of, if I just work harder and work more, I will get to where I want to be faster. That is where the shoulds show up a lot. I often say that should is a shame word, especially when we're building a business and we tend to compare ourselves to others or think of all the things that we should be doing. Rest is not earned. It is a necessity. Rest is not earned. It is a necessity. Building it into a block of time is crucial for me as a business owner. I've spoken before also about being in your zone of genius. It can feel like flying. There is some time blindness that happens when you're in your zone of genius. Rest is necessary to be your best self, which means as a business owner, for me as a mother, as a friend, as a partner, as a daughter, as a sister, I am my best self in all of those when I build and rest. Many people say that you can't pour from an empty cup, which I do believe. But the place that I operate best in and that I want to operate in from as much as I can is pouring into others from overflow. My cup runneth over, and that's what I'm pouring into you with. The pour is any of your resources, your time, your energy, your money. I want those to come from a place of abundance and overflow, not a place of scarcity and lack. Rest can look like a lot of things. This time of year, rest can be in the form of putzing around my garden. Sometimes rest is scrolling through TikTok. As I talked about in the intro, TikTok would fall, any form of social media. I enjoy TikTok and YouTube. I also am a big Bachelorette and Bachelor fan. Those would all fall into the not important and not urgent. And sometimes that is rest to me, but I create a lot of intentionality around it. Sometimes my rest is spending Sunday cooking a lengthy meal and just being in my kitchen around ingredients and feeding my family from something that took me time to do. Sometimes rest is binging a TV show. Maybe it's a massage or a pedicure. Maybe it's reading fiction. Sometimes it's yoga. Sometimes it is meditation. So it can take a lot of different forms. I heard a rule once, and I'm not very good at following it, but I'm working on it. The rule is 1-3-7. 1 day a week should be total rest. Every month, you should have a 3-day weekend, and every quarter, you should take at least a week off. Looking back, when I was thinking about this episode, I realized I haven't taken a full week off since February of 2022. So I am not a shining example of how to follow it. That is my ideal state. That's my next growth edge, is working towards that. We do what we can, and finding ways to build that into my week is really important to me and makes my business better and makes me a better business owner, and is one of the reasons why I wanted to start my own business, is to be able to live the lifestyle that I want to live, which includes rest time. When I think about where I was when some of my greatest ideas hit me, it was not sitting at my desk answering emails. I was out in nature. It was when I was moving my body. It was when I was in the car with the radio off. I was in a state of being, not doing. And sometimes that looks like rest, dedicated rest time. Time block number 3, CEO time. We spend a lot of time in our business, especially being a solopreneur. You do all of the things. There is a never-ending to-do list, and that is really important. And we need to think big picture. In my community, we have a morning mindset call once a week, and it's an opportunity to think big picture. This can mean a couple things. Sometimes it can mean thinking, where do I want to be by the end of the year? Sometimes it is ideation of what a crazy goal would be. Sometimes it's thinking about who would a really cool partner be that I could make and look for. Sometimes it's what blocks are coming up for me at the moment. Why am I procrastinating on something? Where is the friction coming from? Maybe it's what kind of business do I want to run, and how can I act as if I am running that business right now? Sometimes it's resetting my office. One of my favorite ways to spend this time is going to Money Church and working on my money mindset. Sometimes it's journaling or reading a growth book. The point of it is to take a 20,000 foot level view and just really get a big picture idea of where my life is, where my business is, and what are some things that I can be doing to move towards my North Star goal. It's not working on the checklist and not having specific tasks to focus on. There have been so many times of clarity that have come when I'm thinking big picture, and same thing with many of the entrepreneurs that I work with. They have a lot of aha moments happen, breakthroughs, things that they don't really see, again, when they're doing that to-do list. Sometimes I really enjoy having this time with other people because they can see things that I can't. I'm too close to it. There are many times where they remember something that I said previously that sticks with them and make connections that I can't. I heard once that you can't read the label from the inside of a bottle, and sometimes when we're building a business, we're in it, we're living in the bottle, and we can't read the label from there. So that's why it's helpful sometimes to have other perspectives, other points of view, some diversity of thought.
If you've been thinking about starting a podcast and you want to include interviews with people across town, Riverside.fm offers unbelievable high-quality recordings regardless of your or your guest internet quality. And it also gives you separate audio and video tracks for each person speaking. And unlike Zoom, you don't have to install anything on your computer, and your guests don't either. Head over to Riverside.fm and use promo code JazzyCast to get 60 free minutes of recording and 15% off a membership plan.
I'm struggling to hire the right people for my team.
Oh, you need L21 Solutions.
But I don't want to use a recruiting agency.
L21 Solutions isn't an agency. They help employers who feel stuck learn to recruit so they can hire quality talent.
Sounds like I need L21 Solutions.
Yeah, they offer a 1-hour recruitment audit for only $247.
That's less than I spend on a job posting.
Visit L21Solutions.com to schedule your recruitment audit today. Rate is subject to change.
Girl, where have you been? I haven't seen you at work in a while.
Girl, I quit and started my own business.
Really? That's amazing. How did you do it?
Well, I've been listening to this Beauty Boss Millionaire podcast, and it really helped me change my mindset from an employee to a CEO.
All that from a podcast?
Yes, the Beauty Boss Millionaire walks you through the process of starting a business and making your first million.
I need that in my life. I need someone to help me.
Just go to beautybossmillionaire.com or pull it up on your favorite podcast app. It's time to boss up.
I always talk about how no matter what we serve the world with, there are so many things on our journeys that are so similar. In my last interview with Jana, her and I don't create anything really that similar. She has a paper product-based business, but I found so much of what I've gone through in hearing her story. Alone CEO time is important too, but don't be afraid to add community CEO time to your list as well. What I hope you see through all of these is that there is no one way to do them. for me or anyone else. They can look different day to day, week to week, month to month. What feels good for you for each of these may not feel good for you the next time you do it, or you may just be craving something else. So listen to what feels good for you when you're building in these time blocks. All right, on to time block 4, dedicated brainstorming time. One of my favorite things is ideating. I love a big whiteboard session, throwing things out at it with a brain trust and seeing what sticks. It is full of glitter and what ifs in the good way, and it's full of possibility. This is another one that is good to do both alone and with others. We all know what brainstorming looks like and what it feels like. But when you feel inundated with tasks, creating space for the brainstorming can fall to the wayside. It is a fun way to let your brain play and wander. While there are times that I think it is important to have an end in mind with brainstorming, for instance, when you're creating a sales funnel or brainstorming ideas of where your ideal client hangs out and how you can show up in those places and, your next marketing cadence. There are also times where I think it's great to ideate and you don't know where the end is. I would love to have an Airbnb in Sedona and then 4 times a year run a retreat where I bring a bunch of women entrepreneurs to do a whole week of all of this stuff. I love to sit and brainstorm ideas like that, which are far off and big, but again, that's letting my brain and my mind just wander. Sometimes we can get into the tactical stuff and execution stuff, but it is really fun to let your brain just go into the grandiose plans without really knowing, as Mike Dooley says, thinking about the cursed hows. So brainstorming is one that is fun, and in my community, I like to call it ideation station, and we just sit and ideate with each other, and it's a very definitely high vibe activity. So dedicated brainstorming time is a cool way to spend some time. Last but not least, dedicated thinking time. Spending time thinking deeply. While you may hear this and think, aren't all the rest of these about thinking deeply? Yes. Yet this one has no goal in mind. It is about letting your mind wonder about things. In Arianna Huffington's book, Thrive, which I highly recommend, she talks about the power of wondering. One example that she gave was going to an art gallery and staring at one piece of art for many hours. And you're like, well, that sounds really boring. Like, how many things can your mind wonder about with one piece of art? And it really is like pushing yourself in that area. There are so many great things that have come from technology and having information at our fingertips. I mean, I am a living example of that, having a virtual community. There's so many people that I never would have met if it weren't for technology and the internet. High Vibe is completely virtual. And one of the downsides, or maybe things that we just need to be a lot more intentional with, is giving space for our brain to wander and wonder. You never have to sit and think like, I wonder how that came up, because what do? You Google it. Growing up, my dad had a brown recliner that he would sit in and just think deeply about things. Sometimes he was accompanied by a book or the newspaper, but we knew when he was in that chair that he just didn't have any technological distraction. He wasn't getting lost in anything other than his thoughts. Sometimes he would think deeply about business, or sometimes politics. Sometimes it was just his life. But that was his space to let his mind wander and wonder. There's never a lack of things to wonder about. So those are my 5 dedicated times, and I do want to say that some of these things do cross over. Can brainstorming time also be creative time? Yes. Can creative time be painting, which also feels restful? Yes. Sometimes journaling can feel restful, and sometimes it checks the CEO time block. Sometimes it is the brainstorming piece. Sometimes this dedicated time is an hour. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. Sometimes it's the whole afternoon. I really try to let each time block take up the space that it needs.
Hey, if you like this episode, check out Getting Real with Bossy, where we chat about what it's like to be a woman business owner.
You'll hear interviews with women who are doing what it takes to succeed and the reality of what that looks like.
We cover all the topics, figuring out the rules and regulations, navigating business partnerships,
even if that's your spouse, motherhood while running a business, working within your values,
and all the ups and downs of being the boss.
Are you ready to get real? Pop over to our podcast, Getting Real with Bossy.
So to recap, the 5 times that you should, as a business owner, have on your weekly scheduled Google Calendar or whatever you use as dedicated rest time, CEO time, brainstorm time, thinking time, and creative time. I hope that this gave you some permission to take time like this on a weekly basis for your business and your life, because some of the listeners of this podcast don't have their own business, but they're the CEO of their own life and how they build it that way. So I hope this gave you something insightful to think about and ponder on. And I would love if you sent me a message on Instagram and told me what your favorite one of these things was and something maybe you learned from the podcast. So I'd love to connect on Instagram at High Vibe Cowork on Instagram. Again, thank you to our sponsor, L21 Solutions. Make sure you check out their free event about creating a pipeline for fresh top-tier talent September 19th at the Pittsburgh Public Library. If you did enjoy this episode, make sure you subscribe to High Vibe Table Talks, and we will see you all next week because it's high time you go after your high vibe.